Okay, if my property is not purchased but loses value because of the tollway being built, is there compensation for people that do not sell or property not being acquired?
I think the question is there compensation to a property owner who the department does not need to acquire any of your?
Correct.
Are you, if you're the adjacent, or we draw our proposed right-of-way line in the dirt and we do not need to buy any property from you, is there any compensation to you? And the simple answer to that is no. Unfortunately, there is not. We only compensate those property owners from whom we need to purchase property.
And not regarding, is about losing
the devaluation of your property. Again, that is not something that we compensate the property owner for.
Why are you taking so many pictures of our homes if you're waiting to take them, if you be taking them for so long? Why are you taking so many pictures of our homes?
It was, I think we had the same question at the public meeting, and there was a number of areas near where the Kankakee was that we had numerous additional corridors that were suggested. So we had, we did field, we went out there to the field, and so we took some pictures. That's why we were out there. It could be somebody from PB, it could be somebody from IDOT, and we're going to be out there for the next 2 years on a number of corridors. And so there was about 6 or 8 different corridors that we looked at through just that one little area. So we went out there and looked and did field surveys, or not really a survey, but just field review of the area. We did that for all the corridors, and we'll continue to do.
Also, we are required to take pictures of any building that may have historic value too.
Yes.
Why is it so important to follow the power lines?
Well, when we looked at all the corridors in this area, and C4, for example, didn't follow the power lines. You looked, and it seemed when we were looking at all of the impacts that the power lines had the least impactive. It was impactive to farms, the least impactive to buildings. And so, when we looked at widening, for example, just Wilmington Peatone Road, there is a number of houses located adjacent to Wilmington Peatone Road. So we were looking at a lot of residential displacements, looking at just widening on existing alignment. So then you look to the south. Well, can I go south of Wilmington Peatone? There's a number of floodplain impacts that we had down there. So when you added it all up, and we did look at a number of other alternatives, it's the flood. You have to weigh all 100 evaluation criteria. We have over 100 evaluation criteria in the GIS database that we looked at. Threatened and endangered species being one of them, but you look at wetlands, you look at floodplains, you look at property impacts, both residential, commercial, farming. So you look at all of that, and that's why the B3 corridor went north of the power lines where it is. We saw it as one of the least impacted corridors, and like I said earlier, we actually did, near I-57, dip it south. And will continue to go up and down.
The next questions are in regards to stakeholder input in the Wilmington area. If people of Wilmington stand together and reject the B3 alternative, will IDOT consider one of the other alternatives, or will it proceed with B3?
Stakeholder input is very important, and I do appreciate the turnout tonight. And so we'd like to take your input and understand, how can a B3 corridor be the best corridor it can be near Wilmington? It does benefit the entire area, including Wilmington, including providing access to really a lot of, providing and helping Wilmington grow, helping all the communities within this area grow. They're going to grow regardless if we do nothing. If we don't do anything, everything's going to grow, and it'll help facilitate that. So there is a benefit there. But we will take all of your input into consideration as we draw corridors, as we look to refine the corridors. So I I ask that and that you continue to stay with the study. Illiana Corridor, for example, has the B3 corridor on it. We had a lot of comments asking for the, to put this map online, and we did that. And so we'd like to continue to refine that and look at how to minimize that, and hopefully come up with a solution that best fits the area.
How many Will County board members have already bought property along the route? And then I guess this, along the lines of the petition, will B3 continue?
Again, I just ask that we're going to be out here for the next 2 years. We continue to just work with you on developing the least impacted corridor that we can. And whether, looking at the B3 corridor in particular, let's try to make that the best we can. So that's, and I'm not aware of anybody that has bought property along the corridor, because I think it's very speculatory at this point. And if they bought near I-57, for example, we just shifted it all south. So they just lost a bunch of money.
Regards to CBG members who from the city of Wilmington advocated, or the CBG TTF meetings who advocated for the Illiana to come through Wilmington.
Well, the CBG Technical Task Force meetings, it's just a collaborative effort, looking at all of the corridors, all the spaces. What makes the most sense? You look at the A1 corridors, you look at the lots of impacts up there. You look at the A3S1, you look at the diagonal impacts. So the diagonal impacts, when you try to connect one of the northern corridors to the southern corridors, you're putting a line that's diagonal through a bunch of squares. So you got a lot of farm severances, a lot of farm parcels. So when you take in the totality of everything, we were looking at the last public meeting saying B3 is the best performing so far. And we've gotten a number of additional alternatives, and we'll continue to refine these corridors and look at even potentially new corridors on the north. And so if you have a better corridor, I'd like to look at it. I like to evaluate it. I like to put it into GIS. I like to put a travel performance behind it.
In regards to benefits, doesn't this benefit Indiana more than Illinois? I-80 in Indiana is terrible, but when it crosses into Illinois, do we in Illinois really need this?
Well, we are still developing those build scenarios, but the tremendous growth that we saw when we were looking at the no-build solution was in Will County. Will County continues to grow. And so when you look at that, there is a tremendous benefit for Illinois as well as Indiana. And connecting it from the intermodals, the large companies that are moving in near I-55, all the way to I-65, you get a regional benefit.
In regards to the I-80 and that close proximity, building a second expressway so close to I-80 makes little sense due to the low population in the area. I think you talked about this next question, how do you take into account public feedback, and how do you justify the close proximity to I-80?
I think I answered this question. When we looked at the purpose and need and the trucks and all of the growth in this area that's projected, and then also looking at just really the tremendous growth, we did look at the close proximity to I-80. The public involvement activities were out here for another 2 years.
It sounds like you plan to pick the corridor, then calculate the impacts based on the final decision. Seems like backwards logic to me. Shouldn't impacts to communities be the highest priority?
When we looked at impacts, again, we're trying to find the best balance of travel performance, impacts, community cohesion. So when we were trying to find that balance, the first thing we looked at was just impacts, direct impacts, social and environmental. Social being residents, building, residential impacts, building impacts, farming impacts, environmental being threatened endangered species. Then you find that best balance with travel performance. You know, what is this gaining me? Why am I here? Is if A3S1 is performing, you know, less than another corridor, then an you know, one of the corridors is more impactive, then that's where we're coming up with our decisions. Is we're weighing all the corridors against each other and comparing them, and we're picking the one that's the least impacted that maximizes the travel performance.
In regards to Medewan and the use of that, why can't we petition the government to use part of Medewan and for the use of this tollway?
Yeah, Medewan would require congressional law for it. So you will, you know, you can ask your congressional senators, not state senators, congressional. So you got to go to Mark Kirk or Dick Durbin in order to get something like that passed. And then you have to petition and say, okay, well, here's this nationally protected land. Can we put a road through it? So that's the law that would have to be passed. We can put a road through federally protected lands for threatened and endangered species and all that. So you could go that route. We just don't think we could ever get that passed.
Yeah, for your information, the law is called the Illinois Conservation Act of 1995. You can look it up on Google or whatever. That's the federal law. And I think the exact language is no new road shall be built through the Medewan National Tallgrass Prairie.
Who voted that in?
What impact will a bridge have to the wildlife in the Kankakee River? Is this any different than the impacts on Medewan?
I think I answered that. Is that in Tier 2 we will do the detailed survey. Right now we're across the Kankakee River. We are not identifying any threatened and endangered species impacts. And so that's something that we continue to look at in Tier 2.
How, in this regards to bike trails, how will the bike trail be affected?
Parallel crossing of bike trails, and that's something that we would like to continue into Tier 2. When we talk about overhead structures, we also talk about connectivity. We don't want this road as much as it is going to be a barrier, we don't want it to be a barrier. So we'd like to connect future trails. On our GIS system, we have a lot of future trails in Will County that are planned. And so we'd like to take all of that into account along with the existing bike networks, existing bike systems. So we'd like to include that in as part of the details of Tier 2. We will, and we have identified those all within Tier 1.
2 questions in regards to the tollway. What private investors have expressed interest, and will B3 tollway eventually become a freeway like the rest of Illinois tollways?
Well, currently there is no concessionaire that has stepped forward. We normally go through what's called an RFP or an RFQ, request for proposal process. That process takes somewhere along the lines of 2 years. And for a facility like this, even to put together a proposal, costs somewhere between $6 to $10 million for a concessionaire just to propose on such a facility like this. Usually with P3, that does last the term of the lease. There are a few cases, one in California, where the state bought back from the P3 concessionaire to buy it back, to change it from a toll lane to a general purpose lane. That's the only one I know of, but the state had to buy it back. Usually it's the term of the lease.
Okay, that's all the questions I have here. It's after 8 o'clock. We certainly will be here back in the exhibit room to ask, if you have further questions and detailed questions. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
What happens to all the other questions that didn't get answered? Are going to be online available for everybody to see?
The questions were very similar. If you have more detailed questions, feel free. We have comment forms. We have answered over 400 questions over the last year. Feel free to look online, and you can write your question. We have comment forms here. We'll still be here tonight. If you have further detailed or questions to these answers that we...
Wilmington citizens, tomorrow's the council meeting. I suggest you guys, if you're concerned, you go there, voice your opinion without council people, because there's no debate here. I asked the question, do we ever have an open forum debate? There was no answer to that question. So I suggest tomorrow, 7 o'clock, city council has a meeting. If you're concerned, come to it. Voice your opinion there. They'll listen.